in times of great political divide and global conflict, global resolution can happen. In fact, just on March 2nd in Nairobi, Kenya, 175 of the world's global leaders courageously decided to find common ground on one of the most pressing issues plaguing our planet today, plastic pollution. With the knock of the gavel and a standing ovation, even those of us who were just watching through live stream could feel the hope and optimism in the room as this group of individuals sort of fought through what have been years and years of divisiveness and strain. The UN member states unanimously voted in favor of a legally binding treaty to address plastic pollution, one that is inclusive of the entire life cycle of plastics, and one that could be realized as soon as 2024. This is pretty exciting for us. We've been working on this for over 7 years. And that's because no environmental crisis has ever been addressed at scale without a global treaty. Because tackling major global crises is about changing trajectory. It's about shifting momentum. It's about course correcting against ingrained beliefs, existing processes, and expectations. It's going to take hope. It's also going to take a lot of pragmatism. It's going to take the willingness to change and the willingness to compromise. But we're all going to need to start by agreeing on the issue at hand and ultimately on what end state we're going for. So Christopher Reeves once said, once you choose hope, anything is possible. I think it's pretty easy to be pretty jaded these days about things. And so I'm going to ask you today with me in this moment to choose hope. Because there are some great examples of how these treaties have helped us to protect our planet in the past. Let's take the Montreal Protocol that went into force in 1989. The healing of our planet's atmosphere is arguably one of the last few decades' great environmental wins. And it all started with governments coming together to listen to the data, to listen to the scientists. Because in the 70s, scientists started raising the alarm that certain chemicals were rapidly depleting our Earth's ozone layer. And so in the decade that followed, 197 countries came together, they signed and ratified the Montreal Protocol. And what that did was phase out the production and consumption of these ozone-depleting substances. It still protects our atmosphere today, and there's evidence that our ozone is healing. Without coming together and just figuring out that plan, we wouldn't be here where we are today. Now, I know that these issues are not completely comparable, right? To heal our atmosphere, the Montreal Protocol created targets. For plastic, we really need a global treaty that's going to roll back a crisis on the ground. And we can't do that by just setting targets. We need to have a roadmap that tells us how to actually meet those targets. And I think we need one that actually works for a whole diverse set of communities that are going to depend on it, right? The global treaty can set that groundwork. It can get us started on a path forward, just as past treaties have helped us to do. Now, that's because a global treaty is more than just an agreement. I'm going to get a little bit meaningful here, but it is a symbol of international alignment against a shared threat. It's a collective resolve for nations around the world to neutralize that threat. And it can bring together a myriad of perspectives, diverse perspectives and cultures, so that the proposed solutions work for all people, not just the developed nations. We cannot tackle the issues that plague our planet by depending on individual country actions alone. Because atmospheres and oceans do not adhere to state lines, and therefore neither can our solutions. If we're going to tackle this at scale, we need to do it together. We cannot just depend on individual country policymakers to put forward solutions. We don't even have an agreed upon method to measure leakage today. We need consistent and harmonized data so we can understand material flows. Only once we're talking in that same numerical language can we move the dial on the issue. That's where the agreement could come in. It could create that framework that we all follow. The same is true for businesses. Over the last few years, big multinational businesses have stood up. They have doubled their ambition to tackle plastic. And yet, plastic pollution continues to grow. The will seems to be there, but the enabling elements for that meaningful systems change are just not. And of course, without that pesky harmonized data, how do we know if what we're doing is working or if there's the impact we need? We need that that global agreement to make sure that these individual actions are actually being successful. And a global treaty can do that. It can coordinate stakeholder actions. It can drive innovation. It can help support the development of a methodology for us to actually measure that impact. It could help us to set targets both nationally and globally. Now, the resolution is in place. And what begins now is 2 years, maybe more, of hard work really getting us to that final global treaty. And it's important for companies to ask themselves today how they want to use their critical influence throughout the process. Before UNEA 5.2, we asked companies to simply support a global treaty. Then running up into it, we asked them to advocate not just for a global treaty, but one that was legally binding, one that was inclusive of the entire life cycle of plastics, and one that could be realized soon because we have no time to waste. And now that that final resolution is in place, the work can begin, right? So the question is probably like, and I'm getting it from a lot of you, where do we go from here, right? Well, first of all, we want to look at the end goal, right? At the end of this, we want a final treaty that has all the essential elements that are needed for success. That's going to mean that we need to continue that drumbeat of advocacy from NGOs, businesses, and individuals going strong. We need to make sure that that final treaty is truly going to deliver on what we need. That final resolution is actually going to act as a catalyst for action on the ground right now in the US and abroad. And companies can support those UN member states as they move from commitment to implementation. It is critical that we move beyond those high-level co-designing of policies into implementation so we can actually get those systems that are circular. That we move from R&D of materials and solutions into the ones that we can actually use and recover in that system. And more importantly, we need to continue to invest in new business models like reuse so we can reduce the demand on our planet in the first place. The work on the global treaty is just beginning, but the work for plastic pollution has been going on for a while. We have a lot of volunteer initiatives on the ground today that can be proof points for what is possible. I think you can all tell that I'm pretty excited about this opportunity. I've been fighting for this for many years with a lot of you here in this audience. And I personally have never seen a moment like this, one where businesses both feel the urgency of an issue but have a unique opportunity to see it through, to make part of solving it their legacy. Over the next few years, I am going to be calling upon all of you, not just to do your part, because you know I already have that expectation. Yes, that didn't change. I'm going to ask you for more, as I usually do. I'm going to ask you to stand shoulder to shoulder with me as we help governments to do their part. You know, this fall, the International Negotiating Committee workshops will commence. And right before then, we are going to send another signal. We are going to bring together NGOs and companies and individual leaders, and we are going to tell the UN member states that we support that resolution. And it is going to be at that time that those who join us will truly believe in that treaty. And so the question I have for you is what companies are going to seize that opportunity? At the knock of that final gavel, different country representatives stood up and they gave final comments. And Assistant Secretary of State, Monica Medina, stood up and she congratulated the room. And she said, "This is the beginning of the end of the scourge of plastics on our planet. We will look back on this day for our children and our grandchildren." I know it's not going to be easy, right? That road is going to be steep. But I am optimistic. I am choosing hope because I want to be a part of realizing a world where there is no plastic in nature. And I think y'all do too. Thank you.